am at fault. As a friend of mine put it, feeling that something is wrong with me is the invisible and toxic gas that I am always breathing. Sounds familiar? Yeah? So when we experience our lives through this lens of personal deficiency or insufficiency, we're imprisoned in this, what I would call the illusion of unworthiness. Trapped in this illusion, we're unable to perceive the truth of who we really are. Yet, because our habits of feeling insufficient are so strong, awakening from the illusion involves not only inner resolve, but also an active training of the heart and mind. It takes a lot of hard work to pull ourselves out of this, to become aware of this, to become mindful of this, to be sensitive to the trappings of this. So these are precisely the things from which we work to free ourselves on the Buddhist path, the habitual patterns that dominate our life and make it hard for us to see the awakened state of our minds. What are we looking for? Why do any of us enter a spiritual path today? What are we looking for? Whether our problem is suffering or a desire to know, we're actually living with profound questions every day. Why do you get out of bed when the alarm goes off at 6:30 a.m.? What goes through your mind when you turn out the lights at midnight? Our questions actually get lost in the busyness of our life, but they never really go away. If we catch them and we look at them in odd moments, sometimes when you're pouring your first cup of coffee and you go, what am I doing? Who am I? What is this? Or sometimes when you're waiting at the red light, why am I waiting? When we are doing this, and when you're aware of these questions, we can begin to see beyond this job of life to life itself. We don't have to wait until life becomes shaky, until we're facing pain, disappointment, loss, or the fear of death to ask questions that are spiritual in nature. All we need to do is to let our questions back in. Let your questions back in. To discover your real questions, simply take a time out. Stop looking ahead of yourself at where you're going, or backward at where you've been. When you do stop, there is a sense of going nowhere. You're not rushing to something. You're not reminiscing about something that happened in the past. When you can do that, there's a sense of gap, which is a tremendous relief when you're not rushing towards something or regretting about something. You can simply breathe and be who you are at that moment. So at the same time, when you can do that, there's a basic sense of what? Maybe that's your first question. Just be there with that what? With an open mind. That what is like an open door. Something will come through it. It may be an answer. It may be another question. You don't have to do anything about it, but just be there to meet it. So in the beginning, we may think that having questions is a sign of ignorance. In this culture, that's what we've been trained. We think that the more questions we have, the more we don't know. And we think that the more answers we have, the wiser we are. This is the cultural assumption that we have. But, however, knowing clearly what you don't know is already a form of wisdom. Real ignorance is not knowing what you don't know. When you think you know something, you actually don't. It can lead to a kind of make-believe wisdom. It is an imaginary sense of knowledge that is powerless to free you from your confusion. So as long as our questions are honest and sincere, They're not questions that will make us feel smart or look better. The questioning mind opens up the spiritual journey. But we must learn to work with our questions skillfully. We're going through a process that takes time and necessarily brings up doubt and skepticism. Doubt that leads us to authentic knowledge and confidence turns out to be wisdom in the end. So for some of you who have been practitioners in our tradition, the lineage of Master Sheng, Shufu, one of those things is he had often talked about investigating the mind. And you can't investigate the mind if you have no curiosity and if you have no doubt of what. So that's what Buddhism is really about, questioning this, engaging in this spiritual journey. What are we doing here? On this path, we're actually searching for meaningful knowledge. We want to know who we are and why things happen to us. Aside from managing to survive until we're put in a nursing home by our children, what are we doing here? So, a spiritual question is primarily one we ask ourselves and process alone. Just as our answers must come from within, our questions come from inside of us too. It does not come from outside. It's all inside. In Buddhism, we say that every one of us have the Buddha nature, that the answer is right within us. So they all come from the same place. Our questions are actually connected to something we already know. And each question will lead to an answer that will lead to a further question, and so on and so forth. That is called investigating the mind. As our understanding grows, our questions become clearer and our answers more meaningful. This is how the spiritual path progresses. It doesn't really come from outside. It comes from within yourself as you investigate yourself. So some of our questions can be answered right away, but we must be as patient as scientists are. When they run their experiments and they diligently evaluate and verify their findings. So it's the same thing that we do when we investigate our minds and who we are. What are we doing here? We have to keep running our experiments, continually evaluating and verifying our findings. We cannot fully understand light until we have experienced dark. Just like we do not know what true freedom is until we become aware of our true suffering. So a spiritual path is an inner journey that begins with questions about who we are and about the nature and meaning of our existence. It's naturally a process of introspection and contemplation. Just to do a little bit of a plug, for the young people, if you're participating in the workshop this afternoon, we will actually engage in an exercise to help you discover who you are without your social profiling. And for those who are participating in Sunday's workshop, we will do the same exercise again to help you discover who you are without your social profiling. So, although Buddhism can be practiced religiously, but because of its emphasis on questioning and working with the mind, it is actually spiritual in nature. Because it relies on logical analysis and reasoning, as well as meditation, many Buddhist teachers that I've met all over the world actually regard Buddhism as a science of mind. In each meditation session, we gather knowledge about the mind through observation, questioning, and testing. And we keep doing this over and over until we gradually develop a meaningful understanding of our own minds. We take this practice and we go out into our daily lives and we continue to do the same thing. We observe, we question, and we test to see who we are and what is our minds. So some people even become wary of Buddhism because it actually gives them a lot of work to do. They have to ask all the questions, and they have to find all their own answers. There's no answer that's going to be given to you unless you discover it yourself. So in whatever way we label the teachings of Buddha, whether it's a religion or it's a spiritual path, the body of knowledge that comprises the Buddhist scriptures is not intended to be a substitute for your own questioning process. You have to do the questioning yourself. It is more like a well-equipped research laboratory where you find tools of all kinds to investigate your own experience, things as they are. In Buddhism, we are not trying to look at the physical world by itself. Instead, we're actually looking at the mind and its relationship to the appearances of the world. We observe the mind and to see that what the mind itself is and how it acts in relation to our internal and external experiences of everything. So from our thoughts and our emotions to actual things. So to do this, we actually need a special set of tools. And these tools can take us beyond the mind's imagination and the mind's limitation. So Buddhism uses the tools of meditation and a process of reasoning to help you discover this, things as they are. So looking at the mind, as I'm talking about all of this, let me raise another example and share with you my own experience on vulnerability, the illusion of unworthiness. My mind is speeding frantically, but my body feels heavy and exhausted. I move as if through molasses, completely alone and shadowed by the fear of failure. I am trapped in my dilemma. Nothing else in the world exists but that. This dream captures the essence of the illusion of unworthiness. Does it sound familiar? Sounds familiar? Some of you may have experienced similar things. So in our dreams, we often seem to be the protagonists in a prescriptive drama, fated to react to our circumstances in a given way, again and again and again. It seems like you can't get out of it. We seem unaware that choices and options might exist. We think that we always have to do it that specific way. So when we are in the illusion and we're caught up in our stories and fears about how we might fail, we're in much the very same state too. We're living in a waking dream that completely defines and delimits our experience of life. The rest of the world is merely a backdrop as we struggle to get somewhere, to be a better person, to accomplish, to avoid making mistakes, as in a dream. We take our stories to be the truth, a compelling reality for us, and they consume most of our attention. So while we eat lunch or drive home from work, while we talk to our partners or read to our children at night, we continue to replay our worries and plans. Our minds are so absorbed in these, our worries and our plans. So inherent, actually, in this illusion is the belief that no matter how hard we try, we're always in some way falling short. So feeling unworthy goes hand in hand with feeling separate from others, separate from life. So if we're defective, how can we possibly belong? It's actually a vicious cycle. The more deficient we feel, the more separate and vulnerable we feel, the more we want to isolate ourselves, the more we want to defend ourselves. So underneath our fear of being flawed is actually a more primal fear that something is wrong with life, that something bad is going to happen. And our reaction to this fear is to feel blame, even hatred, toward whatever we consider the source of the problem. It could be ourselves, it could be others, it could be even hatred towards life. But when we have directed our aversion outward, deep down, we still feel vulnerable. Even if you blame everyone outside of you, you still feel vulnerable. So our feeling of unworthiness